So I'm Trent McCarthy and I'm the Greens candidate for Northcote. I think a critical issue is stopping the East-West link and seeing that investment in public transport, schools and hospitals and health. We've got a really critical choice here in this state election between $18 billion potentially being invested in one toll road versus that money being spread across a whole lot of areas that make a real difference in people's lives. And the Greens are the only party that are actually truly standing up to stop East-West link, regardless of what happens before or after the election. So having Greens in Parliament in the lower house means that we can stop that toll road from going ahead and see that investment spread more evenly across the state in those areas that I think people know need that investment. And that's one of the reasons why I'm standing, but I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people are going to be voting Green for the first time and sometimes for the 7th or 8th time as well. I think having a background in comedy means that I can talk about things in a different way and open up the conversation to more people. Not everyone's engaged in politics, and that's fine. Some people find Parliament and parliamentary politics frustrating, and I think we can bring a bit of light and humour to the conversation. And in fact, one of the things that my experience on council and through various other activities has taught me is that you've got to make it meaningful to people. And you've got to start with where people are at, not where the political parties are at. And I think humour is one of the ways to do that. My favourite quote is by Victor Borger, who said that laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And politics should be about bringing people together, not just about creating a divide and conquer society. I think social media is a great leveller. It's a very democratic space. So anyone can send me a tweet or post a message on Facebook, and it's very accountable, because then I have a responsibility to get back to that person and everyone can see that response. So we love social media, particularly Facebook and Twitter, for that purpose, because I think it really opens up the conversation. But for a lot of people, they don't have time to come to an event, and unless you knock on their door, and we've door knocked lots of people, it's a way for them to engage in the campaign as well, and to share what's important to them, and to share the sorts of things that we're talking about in the campaign with their friends and family. So it's when you are running a campaign and you don't get donations from developers, and you won't take donations from big business, you're reliant upon these sorts of ways to communicate with people. I think being a councillor has been a really exciting and also occasionally frustrating experience, because you see the changes that need to be made to both legislation and regulations at the state level. So I think I've learnt a lot about the sort of changes that I'd like to see made and the Greens would like to see made through state parliament. But I think what I've also learnt through being a councillor is that you can forge great alliances across political lines on certain issues. And so it's one of the things that I believe very strongly that the Greens can do really well in state parliament, is actually find points of agreement with people from other parties who may agree with something that we support, but simply haven't been able to raise it through their own party. So it's opening up conversations, which is something I've done through council, and certainly something I'd like to do in state parliament. I've been able to put on the agenda at Darebin Council concerns around cyclist safety and pedestrian safety. And in the past, that was something which maybe the council officers were passionate about, but didn't have a political voice supporting them. And so being able to do the same thing at the state level, I think is something I can bring if I'm elected. Well, I think the first thing is that the Greens are interested in moving people, not just cars. So we're prepared to challenge that notion that Vic Roads tends to put forward, and that both major parties tend to put forward, which is you've got to build more roads, and that's the only way to solve congestion. The fact is that transport experts, and I think many people in the community know, the way you deal with congestion, whether it's in the inner city or anywhere within Melbourne, is actually through creating greater options for people to get around. So it's about mobility, and that requires investment in public transport, safer cycling routes, pedestrian movement, so it's making it easier for people to get around their area through walking, riding, catching PT. The sort of investments that we need to see in public transport here in the seat of Northcote and in the northern suburbs will only happen if we stop the East-West link. So that's why we see that there's a really clear choice between that commitment that the current government has, and we're the strongest against that, but we also believe that you need to have a fully integrated transport system that's actually about understanding where people need to get to, whether it's work or study, and creating those options for them so they can get out of the car. And there's a lot of people that would like to travel each day without having to drive, and so we want to see that investment in well-planned public transport and active transport as an alternative to everyone just having to drive because they've got no other choice. Well, one of the things that we've made a commitment to, and the Greens have put legislation forward and we'll keep fighting for, is minimum rental standards. This is not popular with all landlords. Some landlords do the right thing and actually upgrade their properties to make them energy efficient and habitable for their tenants, but some don't. And we believe that we need some basic standards, some minimum standards that all renters should expect in their properties. We don't understand why the other parties haven't supported this legislation, because it is the right legislation that makes a real difference to the lives of renters. And that's something that I'll keep fighting for. It's certainly something the Greens have fought for in Parliament, and having Greens in the lower house of Parliament, such as from Northcote, Melbourne, Richmond, Brunswick and Prahran, can make a difference on that issue. The other issue, which goes against what both major parties tend to talk about, is this whole notion of being tough on crime. We think we can be smart on crime by actually seeing investment not just in new prisons, which is where the current government has been obsessed and has actually talked about prisons as being a job creator. We actually think that you can take money from the end of the system and invest it at the front of the system in prevention. And prevention, particularly when it comes to young people, means that if young people find themselves getting into trouble, you get them back on the right path, which might be getting into education, safe housing, reconnecting with their community and giving them a chance at actually rebuilding their lives. So that's where I'd like to see that investment, and it actually makes not just social sense but financial sense as well, because for every dollar that you spend at the front of the system, you actually save money at the end of the system. Now that's not the sort of stuff that you're going to see on the front page of the Herald Sun, but it's certainly something which the experts agree needs to happen in order to change the system.